Hello and welcome to my design masterclass. I'm Jules. What I want to do with this workshop is just take you a bit behind the scenes. I want to show you my design process, how I work through making decisions I do as a designer. And I am going to be taking you through variations of graphics. I've got some social media posts, I've got a Facebook banner, I've got a lead-in magnet cover, and I also have a leaflet. And really it's just to show you this, no matter what type of graphics that you need to create with your business, the kind of decisions and the why behind the design that I do and why I make the decisions that I make. It's so hard to capture your audience's attention these days because we are scrolling so fast on our phones. I want to show you the techniques that I use to make sure that your graphics get seen and noticed. I really want to show you what it'll be like inside Design Like a Pro Club. It is not about what the latest templates are and the latest courses and hacks and techniques. This is literally time with me, time to get my eyes on your designs as you are working on them week in, week out for your business. I really hope you enjoy the class, and if you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments and I will get back to you. If you want to find out more about designing your Pro Club, it is live now and I will put it in the comments. Thank you. We're going to dive straight in with this first graphic, and this is for a hair and beauty salon. It's for a social graphic, and there's always a tendency sometimes when we are designing to want to add elements that don't actually really have any benefit to the design. For example, adding text effects. They've added the shadow text effect here. But I think what this is actually doing to the design is it's slightly cheapening the look of it. This is a high-end luxury product, luxury service, and we'll see that because they want the text to be read, they've actually added this transparent overlay, but what that's done is it's hiding a really nice image behind it, and the transparent background isn't really adding to the design. And I think one of the most important things to remember here is whenever we're designing, not to add anything for design's sake and not to over design, and think about how you want to use your imagery and text together. So the finished result is this one here, and I'm just going to grab it so that I can sit them side by side and you can see how that I rebuild this. Now straight away you can see the image clearly. The font is actually the exact same font, I've just used it slightly differently, and I'll talk you through the steps here as well. And what I'm really wanting to do is you have to communicate a message and communicate a feeling and an emotion with your graphics, and this is how best to do it. First of all, we've copied the background image. I'm going to redraw these steps with you just now. I'm going to remove this transparent background because it's not really adding anything to the design, and I'm going to ungroup all these text features that are grouped together at the moment. And what you'll notice if I zoom in really closely is that this font is not the correct font to use for this type of business and for the vibe and personality and tone of voice we want this business to have with its visual identity. We're using a font called Quicksand, which looks at almost childlike because of the rounded edges. It doesn't really give that elevated, luxurious feel to it, because we have to remember that there's always kind of personalities to the fonts that we use. I'm just going to change it to something quite simple, and I'm going to use one called Inter. Now, when you are picking one of your brand fonts, it's always really handy to click on the wee arrows so you can see how many different typefaces there are within the font. And this is because you want to have variety. You want to have a range of different weights. You want to have them ranging from light to semi-bold to bold to heavy. And this is because rather than having to think of different fonts you want to use, all you really need to do is the one font that you can make bold, make uppercase, now make thin, and it gives you lots of different variations without having to switch up your fonts. So straight away what we're going to do is we're going to make it all uppercase, and we're going to shrink it right down in size, change the colour to this cream, and I'm also going to make the font weight a bit heavier and then space out the lettering slightly, like so. I don't want to have the effect. I'm going to make the text uppercase. I'm going to centre the text and change the colour. And I'm just making it this light cream colour rather than the blue. Felt like the blue wasn't really working very well. And then we can easily realign, and if you just want to make everything centred, just going to make sure I grab it, go to position, and just make sure everything's centred. There we go. And just going to enlarge it a little bit. So there you can see, even just by changing the way that text there looks, it's already starting to have a much more luxurious feel and still blend in nicely with the background. One other thing I want to show you is, if I zoom in super close, that this actually has a text effect on it. It has a lift. Now the lift I really like because it's much more subtle than the shadow. If I take it off for a second, you'll see, when I zoom out, that the text is slightly blending in with the background here. But if you add this lift, and you can increase the intensity as well, it just helps your text stand out from the background a little more and add a little more depth. So if you feel that your text is still not that eligible against the background, then do always remember that text effect, because it's one I use all the time in my graphics. Now when I scroll down to the bottom, and again I'm going to zoom right in, you can see there actually is a logo placed in this graphic, but it's far too small to be read. And this is a case where you may just have one variation of your logo, so no matter the size or the format, whether it's used in socials or graphics or in print on your website, one size does not fit all when it comes to a logo. You have to have different variations. What I'm going to do instead is just ungroup, and I'm going to take away the full name because it's not needed and it's far too small, and I don't want the logo to overpower the design. Sometimes your logo just has to be a little subtle indication of your brand. It doesn't have to be the full thing. And again, change the colour. So here we can see it's still recognisable as this brand, but we don't have the cumbersome placement of where to place a logo and also be read. And then what we can do is we can add the full name up here. So this information is really secondary. It won't stand out, but you will see it say as an identification factor. And then lastly, I've just again changed the font, and I'm just moving it right down to the bottom of the page, because ideally all I want is this middle part to stand out. If all people read is "treat yourself to a spa day without the splurge," then it's enough information for people to embed it into their head and their subconscious for when they see it again. But if they're really interested, they will go on to read that services are under $100, and then if you scroll up to the top, they'll then read, right, it's the Borsell Hair and Beauty Salon. So that's the order of what I would do to that graphic to help it stand out more. Moving on to the second one. Now moving on to the second graphic, this is one I actually just saw when I was scrolling through my social media this morning on Instagram, and I've actually replicated it. I've taken out the company name that it actually was from so that it's not identifiable, but I thought this was a really interesting one to show you. Now first off, this graphic is far too busy. There is far too much text on it. You cannot actually see the text correctly because if I scroll down here, it's far too close to the edges. Do you imagine looking at this on a mobile? It would feel very cramped. It almost feel like there's text is almost going to get missed off the edge of the page. There's a thing I call white space, or in other words is breathing room, and this is where your eye needs to see framing, and it needs to see space and gaps to take in the information. So the first thing, because right now it's actually quite a complex subject, I don't actually understand it myself, but I have no inclination to even read it because The minute you make something difficult or a challenge or make it feel like it's a bit of an effort, then you lose your audience's attention. You have to make your graphics really simple and clear to understand and easy to read. With graphic design, we're always trying to communicate a message, and right now with this one, it's just far too complex. And this image here is just kind of floating. It's not even directly or exactly in the centre. It looks odd, and then the drop your thoughts in the comments is a call to action, but it is the exact same size of text as the rest of the information, so there's no real hierarchy to that information. There's nowhere for your eye to go first and then flow with information. So I'm going to talk you through how I would change this graphic, and the very first thing I'm going to do is split that information over 2 pages, so it would turn into a carousel post rather than a single image. We have got to think about how we can divide this hierarchy of text up. And what I've done first of all is I have taken this graphic of the girl. I'm just going to walk you through some of it just now. So I'm just going to actually move this out the way, and this too. And I don't know if you'll notice, what I'm actually working on just now is the whiteboard in Canva. I feel this is a really good place to work if you are trying to figure out your design, because you can actually move things off of your graphic and out the way, but not lose them when you're in the actual templates. If you move anything off of the border, then they just drop off and disappear. But I like to, because I'm working across different shapes of graphics, this is a really good format to show you in. And so we've taken away the second part of the text because we don't need that at the moment. I'm just going to really enlarge up this image just now. And it's always interesting to have images kind of cutting off at the edge. We don't actually have to have it the whole image within there. I'm immediately going to range this text left instead of centered, because centered text, if there's more than 2 lines, 3 lines, it becomes quite difficult to read. So by just simply making it left aligned, it becomes much easier to read. And this is because your eye just has this straight line at the left to kind of go back to every single time it's reaching a new line. Now, what I've also noticed here is the text sentences are too long. This is about 8 lines or so. And that's a lot of information for somebody to start to try and read. But if I just take that first sentence and split it into 2 paragraphs, and then what I've noticed is the question is actually these last 2 lines here, but your eye that can't pick out the question that you're being asked because it's right at the bottom of this great length of text. So I've quickly grabbed that. I'm going to copy it, and I can delete it from here. And this time I'm going to make this last line bold, because this is the question. So immediately we want, even if somebody quick skims the first 3 paragraphs but reads this line first, they know they're being asked a question, so then they'll go back and start to read this a bit more slowly, and so they can take in all the information. And then I'm not liking this font. It just, when you get some serif fonts, they have these really thin lines that don't actually stand out that much. And I feel like this graphic is very flat, so I want to add a bit of interest to it, something that would maybe capture your attention when you are standing, when you are scrolling through your phones. And this is why I've added this graphic here. And I found this graphic by going into the elements, and I searched Think Bubble and go into graphics, and there you can see there are lots and lots of different styles. So for example, if I pick like this one, then we can place that here. And you can go up to the top and you can change their colours so it can match your own brand's colour palette. And then I've just changed this text to a really chunky text so that it's really bold and easy to read. And then I can start to resize everything once I have it in here. Oops, didn't mean to lock that. I'm going to move that off as well. So you can see already from what it was before, where it was really difficult to read and just felt very busy, that we are starting to split up that information and just make it quick and simple and easy to read. Always keep thinking, with graphic design, you are wanting to communicate a message. So always think, when you are designing whatever you're doing, think, is it easy to read? Is it quick to read? Then you know that you're kind of on the right way when you're designing this. And what I would then want to do, because we've got this call to action, but I want this to stand out and be a bit different from the rest of the text. So I'm going to make it all caps and I'll make it bold, but it really doesn't need to be the same size as the text above, because this is a secondary piece of information. I don't want it to be seen first. And if I just zoom in, is everyone okay? Everyone's very quiet. There's not much questions. Just let me know you're all still there. And I'm just going to drop that in a wee bit. Just going to add a little box. I'm just going to change this to one of the colours that's already in the graphic here, and change this to white, just so it's a bit of a different colour from all the text up above. And because this is a call to action, it's sometimes good to also add something else, like a graphic of what you want someone to do. So because we want them to drop a comment, we could then add this little arrow, which we could just put here, and then change the colour. So now we've got is these real visual clues within the design. It's a brain teaser, so we're wanting people to think. So adding the speech, the think bubble, then that gives you the association as a question. We have bolded up the question here to make it easier to spot and find. And then lastly, when we want people to comment to get increased engagement, we have just put this in a little box with the arrow to really make it obvious that's what we want people to do. And then actually added this little cue. So again, this is a visual indicator that we are asking a question here. And so what I can then do on the second page is they've actually gave us the answer. But you don't realise that because you're never going to read that long down here to find out what that answer was. So now by splitting it over the 2 pages, that information is much easier to read. And the bonus is when you post as carousels, if your audience doesn't see the first slide, then often Instagram pushes the second page, you get more chances of being seen. Yes. Kirsty, they do. It's just, I see it so often. I was actually this morning when I was like compiling all the different graphics, and I just saw that one and I took a screenshot of it, and I thought that's a prime example of just making something harder than it needs to be. And these simple changes really help. I've got one more social graphic, I think, or maybe 2 more. And again, it's fine. This graphic, it works, but I just feel it's maybe a bit boring and it's a bit too texty, and it's just too texty as in, do you want to read it? But mum burnout is a really impactful message that they're wanting to get across, but it's just not obvious. There is actually a really lovely image here, but the transparency has been turned right down. Now look, that is a lovely image. I just don't feel it's being used well, because it was down here. And the therapeutic massages doesn't really come across. So again, think about emotion attachment and the emotional feelings somebody gets from interacting with your graphics. For the speech bubble example on LinkedIn, would you recommend an animated MP4 where it automatically slides to the answer, or make people click to see the second panel? You could try both. So again, this is a really good way, and it's something I do a lot, is I actually create content 2 or 3 times in different formats. So you could post it the first time as upload as a PDF so that you can get that lovely sliding panel to make people click through and see the second page. But then in a couple of weeks' time, you could post it as an animated video, because LinkedIn are now pushing video content. Not as many creators on LinkedIn are doing video format yet. And also, people always have a preference of how they like to take in information. Some people like to read, some people like to click through carousels, some people like to just sit and watch videos, some people like to view in stories. So by in it creating the same thing 2 or 3 times in different formats means that you're not having to think up as much content as you need to. And you can also repeat. So if you post it 1 week with the carousel, wait 2 or 3 weeks, and then post it as a video, then you can look at your analytics and see how people interacted with it. And then you know whether they like that information in which format best, and then you can do more of it. So I tend to do that. I have some people really love watching my video tutorials. But I have noticed when I post them as carousels, as step-by-step instructions, they are getting lots of saves because it's easier for people to go back to, and then they don't have to keep freezing the screen video to watch it. They can just scroll through each page. So think about how you want people to take in your information, and that everyone has preferences. So what I'm going to do here now is, again, you're welcome, Robin, is take advantage of this image, and I'm going to put them side by side and show you the changes that I've made with this one, because the first thing I've done is really take advantage of this lovely image. And I think you can agree that immediately there is much more emotional attachment to this graphic than the first one. To be honest, if you're focusing on mums who are feeling the burnout, then they're not even going to take the time to read that first one. Whereas immediately using the image of the baby snuggling in. And one thing that people don't use to advantage is making use of curved text. And it's just really kind of highlights, rather than reading it over the 2 lines. They may read it, they may not. They may get to mum burnout is real and then scroll. However, if you take that text and you think of it, text as visual. Yes, it is like a heart shape. So you think of it as a text as a visual element, not just to be read. It can be a beautiful part of your design. And that's what I love to do with text. I love to turn it into something very visual. And I'm going to show you how I done the curved text, because that's the kind of main part I want to take out from this. So I'm going to copy the image and then take it back up to full transparency. I'm going to take this font, but you'll notice if I hover over them that I've actually separated them out into either individual words or just a couple of words at a time. So I'm going to do that just now. And this is so we can really get the curves to fit around the shape that we want it to. If we try to do this all in one line, or even just 2 single lines, it wouldn't work. Oops. I'm just going to cheat slightly and check what size it is, so I can do it quite quickly for you. There we go. So first of all, this image is actually perfectly centered, and we don't want it to be perfectly centered. We want to have a bit of, again, what I like to call white space, breathing space. And I'm just going to move the image right along to the left so that we now have this lovely area of white space that we can put our text in. And in the original image, because the mum and the child were perfectly centred in the image, it was very busy to then try and place text on top of it, which is why I probably think they have then reduced the transparency so the text can be read. So again, with your imagery, don't always think of it's the perfect framing the way the photograph's been taken. You can just take a wee tiny part of that photograph and either blow it up or move it right to the sides. Again, think about where you can see space that you can place text in that image. And then bring these down, and we're going to go to effects and curve. And immediately it gives us quite a big deep curve, but we just wanted to have a slight curve. And again, you can wiggle it around so it's not sitting perfectly straight like it was, to get more of that feel. Let us help you. That's it. The next one. And then this one, I find it helps to turn it around first. So I've got a rough idea of how the shape needs to work. And then I can start to move it into place, because I don't want there to be a big gap between let us and help you. Like that. and then reclaim. So you can see there how I'm just starting to mold the text around the shape, and we'd probably need to increase that slightly just so that it perfectly fits as if it is the sentence is just flowing around the mum and the baby. And then the rest of the text I've kept more or less similar. All I've done is reduce the size of the mum burnout text, because again, this text, if I zoom in, is actually far too light a font weight to be paired with the script. It works much better to reduce the size of the text and make it a bit bolder, so that they kind of, again, it's that think of your text visually, and it looks much better fitting on that page. So I hope that helps with that one. Yep, I've got one more social media one. And again, this is one of my clients that I work with, and they actually sent me a whole host of graphics they wanted to use for an event and asked me to make them fit the branding a bit more, make them a bit more dynamic and interesting. And this one is to meet the host and the speaker. And again, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with this image. It would absolutely work if it's getting used. But I kind of felt there was a few different images they had of this host, and I didn't think that was the best one to use because the image of her is clashing. The colours are clashing with the background, but that background colour is one of their brand colours. But I do know they had some other images of her, and they had this one here, which I just felt was a much better image to use. And what I've done is, I'm just going to bring it across here, is I've used that image of Claire and I've removed the background because the background was quite busy and it was that bright pink couch which wouldn't fit with our branding. And instead of using the light lilac, I've used the really dark purple as the background because I felt this kind of complemented her colours more. And I really wanted to make the most of her name. So rather than her name being the secondary piece of information you read, I wanted the name to stand out because she is a really well-known name in business and stuff, and I knew that there'd be a lot of prominence attached to the event to know that she is the host and speaker of it. And again, I really wanted to play with text here and make it a much more visual element, which is rather than having the text just written out in a plain font fully with both names, I've separated the two names out and made the first name nice and bold, but the second name the script font, and also just slightly changed the angle of it, because sometimes just something as simple as changing the angle, script fonts often look like when they're a signature, they're not a perfectly straight line. So it's just nice having that bit of movement going slightly up the page. And then again, the logo here isn't really making sense. It's a new event. So I felt it was important this time that we had to include the name of the event underneath the logo, just because it's still gaining recognition and you really want to share that logo as much as possible while you're still building brand awareness. And there's a subtle thing I've added at the bottom here, which I'm going to move, and it's a little shadow. And this is one of my favourite things to add. And it's just because it looks a bit harsh when there's just this solid line and the image of Claire is stopping at the bottom, and we've also got the logo sitting behind her. But by adding this gradient that fades into nothing, it just then softens the bottom of this page, which I think really, really helps. And again, it's something I use quite a lot in my designs. If, again, I just want to add a bit of depth to the graphic, it looks a bit flat when that gradient isn't there, but then adding it back in, I think that looks a lot better. Now I'm going to move on to one of my clients, and Ruth is actually on this call. I saw her name pop up and join, and she sent this in to me and said that she'd be happy for me to give this a bit of a redesign and look at. And Oh yes, Amy, I can show you how I did the gradient. 2 wee seconds. Again, this is a really good trick that I do all the time. I'll just zoom right in so we can see it. So to get this effect where it fades into nothing, we start off with a solid box. Let's move this up here so you can see it. And then we're going to go into our colours. And when we click on the plus sign, we'll see here we can choose a solid colour or we can switch to a gradient. And immediately it gives us 2 colours to choose from. And we can also change the colour, the direction, of that gradient. But if we go in here, then we can actually select our hex codes that we know for our own branding. So if I just make this one of the darker ones just now, the trick here is that we copy this so we get the exact same shade, go back to the first colour and paste it in, and you'll notice it's now made it a solid. But if I click on the first colour and down here there's a little toggle, and I'm going to drag it all the way down to the bottom and make it 0%. And this is what then gives us that fade into nothing. If I go back in and I make that a different colour, go in here. So say I make that a pink. Do you notice how that's now? Yes, you can do this in Canva. Do you notice how it's now gave us that pink tone? So although we have made that colour 0%, there is still some of that colour there. And it's now no longer working as such a smooth gradient. So we have to make sure that the colour is this one here, the exact same. That's how you do the gradient. So this one is a leaflet. And again, it's all branded, it's really nice colours and fonts and things. But again, there's just a bit too much information. And I think your eye gets kind of lost and it kind of jumps about because it's not quite sure what to read first. And this is really just, again, what I call hierarchy of information. And when I talk about thinking of hierarchy of information, it's not just the text, it's the images and it's the colours and what stands out the most first. So right now, to me, what's actually standing out the most first is my eye is kind of missing all of this and it's going straight down to the call to action information, which is the contact information. But actually that's the part you want people to see last. And there's a lot going on here. For example, the title, it's actually over 3 lines. It's a lot of words, but it's not actually that clear because it's the wide title over the whole of the graphic, and this is the exact same size. Although it's a different colour, there's not really much of a differentiation there, so I want to make that a lot clearer. Again, what I suggested here is that we make this 2 pages rather than just a single page. And again, I talk a lot about emotional connections and things, but you're going to see that I made quite a few different changes here. So first of all, I took out all of this information from page 1 and felt that's really what you want people to learn of second, and I wanted that to go onto the back page. What is really important is this title, and then the second most important thing here is Ruth herself. Now, because of the services she offers, it's a very personal service, so you have to feel really comfortable at working with her. So I really felt like she had to be actually at the forefront of the front page of this graphic so that you would feel an immediate connection to her and imagine yourself sitting in the room with her, talking to her, or online on a Zoom call with her, which is why I really wanted to make the whole front page be a graphic of Ruth instead of in this small little iPad image instead. And again, you'll notice that I have removed the really harsh blocks of colour here because they are too harsh. Now, a lot of her brand vibe words and brand personality is connection and empathy and kindness, and that doesn't really have hard edges. Her colour palette is very soft. So this is why I have instead introduced the graphic at the bottom, the gradient at the bottom, so that we can actually have her logo popping out and be really noticeable, but it's on this really lovely gradient instead of a hard rectangular block. And then what I've done is I've really made the most of her title, and I've separated it out. So this time, Your Wellbeing Matters becomes the number one prominent piece of information that we want to be the first thing people read. I've also changed the font, and I've changed the font to a serif font, and this is because serif fonts are, again, their brand vibe and personality is that they are seen as very professional and more traditional. But what I've done this time is I've chose a serif font that has rounded edges to them, and this is just to keep that softness in there. And I just felt this font here, while it was trying to appeal and be a bit more informal and a bit more friendly, it was veering towards not the right tone that we wanted to convey with our brand. So we have changed it instead to complementing it with a simple chunky sans serif. And then we've introduced, instead of this handwritten font, I've changed it to this one, Buffalo, which looks a bit more like a kind of handwritten font rather than calligraphy. It's more handwritten. Again, because we do want to keep that element there of approachability and friendliness and keep that connection with our audience. And then I've introduced, rather than it being the text here with her name, I've added it to the picture beside her in that same handwritten font. And again, just to make it feel a bit more personal to the person who's looking at it. And again, think about layering, and I talk a lot about making something have more depth to it. And I've easily done this by adding her logo. As you can see, I can move around, and I've placed it behind the image of her on the couch. I'm going to talk you through how I did that just now. So if I take the image of this, and I'm going to detach the image. Now, you'll all know background remover, and one thing I actually use more than background remover is Magic Grab. And I really like Magic Grab because you can keep the background. Let me just quickly try and select it. I've got everything. Oh, not got that wee bit. Hopefully I've got everything there. Okay, and now what you can see is I can now grab this and move it around from the background. And this just helps because what we can then do is we can actually edit them separately. So we can go into adjust, and we can change the brightness here and really darken that down, or we can lighten it up. We can, if we want, grab a different background image if we don't like that one. So if I grab, let me see, if I go to photos and think in background. Now, obviously some are kind of like a bigger office, but even if we try to grab this one, we move to the front, then you can see that we can actually change the background that she's sitting in. And what this is really good for is if you have brand photography, it gives you more life out of your brand photography. You can mix it up more, you can change the look of it. And also you can then add these really nice visual graphic elements that hints at your branding, but it isn't just your logo placed on a page. And then if I just grab the image and bring it to the front, you can see it now sits behind. So this is what when I say depth and layering. Laurie already had her branding, but she just came to me because she felt that she needed to give her graphics a bit of an overhaul because her clients are all career women in their 40s and above who are coming to her for serious career advice and guidance and coaching. And she just felt like her graphics weren't always hitting the mark. And this is, I've just screenshot her original Facebook ad. And what I will say is Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, banners, sorry, you have to be really careful about how they are shown on desktop and mobile because they change. So underneath here, I have actually got a little infographic that when you're designing a Facebook banner and you are designing it at 1640 by 720, but on a mobile, I was going to just get my pen again. So on the mobile, you do see these parts here, but on a desktop, you don't. And this is why this is from her desktop app, so it's narrower. But when you're viewing on a mobile, it then cuts this part and this part off. So what that then means is this part of Laurie's face would be cut off whenever it is viewed on a mobile. And it's something I see a lot, and it's something that actually drives me a bit nuts in the Canva template library. I see so many graphics that actually wouldn't work in real life on both a mobile and a desktop. So when I have designed it, I'm always thinking of that in mind. So not only have I, yes, Donna, it literally drives me crazy. I have kept her colour scheme, but I introduced a few other colours as well. I introduced much more deeper colour tones to her reds because the red is very bright, and red is that delicate balance of being the right tone of red. So you can see this red with her logo is her original tone of red, but I've complemented it with kind of deeper burgundies and a kind of softer mauve colour as well. And I've also changed, rather than, let me just copy that across, rather than it just being the cutout, and again, background remover is brilliant, but what that can then do is it can give you this very harsh outline, which can make it very obvious that you've removed the background. So instead, what I did here is Laurie had this image of our brand photography, which was really nice, and it has that nice leafy background. But I didn't just want to sit her within the circle. I wanted her to sit outside the circle as well. And again, this is a really interesting way of using your brand photography a bit differently. And simply what I've done is, you can see Laurie's inside the circle, but I have copied another version, removed the background, and then placed it exactly on top so that they can have a much more interesting graphic banner for her to use. And we still get to keep that really nice green background in there as well, which complements the red. So that was just a quick overview with Facebook banners that you need to be careful of. And I've got one more to show you. Again, one of my clients, and this is Jerry, and she's a brand photographer. And this was her original lead-in magnet cover. And she sent the whole document to me for me to give the whole thing a review. And the first thing I said to her was, you're a brand photographer and you're not making the most of your brand imagery that you have, because she has amazing brand photography, and she's, I'm very biased because she is my brand photographer as well, but she is very good. And this one here, and again, her brand colours are reds and navies and yellows. They are vibrant. Her brand photography is vibrant. And she chose one of her neutral colours on her cover and one of her client photos. But the first thing I said to her was, you should be putting a client photo in there. You need to put yourself in there so that people can see who you are. And this is the first one that I've changed it to. I'm just trying to get a kind of good angle here to show you. And again, so it was a very long title, and you tend to get a bit fed up with it before you get to the end of the sentence. So we split it up into step into your spotlight was a saying she was starting to actually say to people, and she was working with Kat Patterson. The two of them come up with step into your spotlight, because that's what she does. And then I have kept the ultimate guide to a successful brand shoot as the kind of secondary subtitle. And then what I've added to it is an image of Jerry actually behind her camera, and I've made it the full size of the page because I think that's much more impactful than what you would see. We feel that this is a safe option is to have a cover, give it a title, and put an image inside a frame shape. It feels quite safe, but it's also quite boring. So this is one way of just making things stand out a bit more. I'm just going to check something actually. No, it's okay. And then if we did, I gave her 2 options as well, because she actually had this other image where you can see her face. So I mean, one is very obvious that she's a brand photographer and this is her working. But if she was happy to have the kind of traditional headshot, then I gave her this option as well. So I just wanted to kind of show you the difference we can make from magazine covers and leading magnet covers. We've also got how to think about your Facebook banner and being careful of where your profile images are sitting on top of the graphic, and also how they are viewed on mobile and desktop. And then we have the information you will send out on your leaflets, and then a few tips for your actual social graphics. And now on to just letting you know about my new club that I am launching. And I know there's lots of memberships and things out there, and I really want to make this one very different. It's not going to be lots of templates and courses and worksheets. It is literally just access to me. And it would be 2 live calls a month where you can send me either your Canva links or your Adobe Express template links when you're stuck with a graphic and you want me to do exactly what I've done here and give it a review and give you real feedback that fits with your brand, fits with your business. But then it's also going to be if you need advice. So I am a graphic designer, I'm a brand strategist. This is my core business. So if you need help with choosing brand colours or a font that you maybe think would fit better than the one you're using just now, these are all the kind of questions that you can ask me. And I'm kind of hoping that even if you don't have anything that week for me to review, even by watching the advice I'm giving to the others in the club and the advice I'm giving them will still help you learn how to design your own graphics more. But you're still learning because you're getting to see the advice that I give usually on a one-to-one basis with my clients. I'm going to give it to you in the club format. And I meant to say that the community is not on Facebook, it's in a private space, it's in the Stan store. And this is just so nobody else will see the information. It's somewhere you can talk to me. In between the live calls, I'll be on in the group every single day. If you have any questions for me, you can just drop them into the community and I will answer your questions for you. Everyone, thank you so much for joining my class live, those of you who came in live. And I will send out a wee email after this, just confirming all the details of the club. And I hope you got a lot from it. So thank you, and all have lovely Christmases when it comes. So thank you so much, everyone.